I'm going to be honest. When the DLC first dropped a couple of weeks ago, I wasn't immediately addicted to the new content the way I had expected to. I was feeling a sense of unease and disappointment that stemmed from the discomfort of learning this drastically different and complex new map. I didn't want to make a review immediately because I knew that to really understand this DLC, I first needed to get myself through the initial learning curve and really learn the ins and outs of what this DLC has to offer. So now, 4 weeks and over 200 hours later, I am here to tell you that I love this DLC. Well, kinda. I don't love all of it, but most of it, and it was definitely worth my time and money. For $15, this DLC contains 2 new Nightlords, each with their own sets of night bosses, 2 new Nightfarers, 3 new raids, and a shifting earth that is basically a brand new map. Watching over my own wish list for the DLC prior to its release, I can definitely say that the contents of this expansion have far exceeded my expectations in many ways. For this video, instead of talking about the parts I like and dislike, I'm going to break down my thoughts on each individual component, hopefully giving you a more comprehensive look at the pros and cons of each section. Most of the hours I have spent with the DLC are in the Deep of Night mode, so most of what I will say will also take into consideration of how this content performs at depths 3 and 4. I will start off by stating my absolute favorite part of the DLC with no caveats. The new Nightfarers, Undertaker and Scholar. I think for how much I love these new characters, I would have been happy with just these for the DLC. Learning new characters and improving at them has always been my favorite part of this game, and it's what keeps the game fresh for me and keeps me coming back. The base 8 Nightfarers already occupy very different roles in a team composition, and throughout the base game and the Deep of Night mode, they each have their own strengths and weaknesses. I had racked up 1,000 hours prior to the DLC release, and my favorite thing about this game is mixing and matching different Nightfarers to create different team synergy. With the additions of these 2 new characters, the potential for more fun team compositions bring a fresh air to this game. The Undertaker is a strength faith girl, and I tend to play her in 2 ways, Big Bunk and Faith Caster. Both options are very viable with the right relics, as she has an 8 skilling in both strength and faith. With the way I like to play her, she can be an even more aggressive melee character than Raider, or a tankier, faster Revenant. There are many things to love about her outside of her stats as well. Her skill replenishes stamina the way Raider's skill does, and her dodge while in the skill resembles Duchess's dodge, all while having a completely overpowered and special skill activated by pressing L2 and R2 when her ult is ready. This feature allows her to res 3-bar teammates, trade hits with bosses, and just completely bypass hard-to-dodge AoEs and combos, making her practically unkillable. She was fairly easy to pick up and learn for me, and her passive ability that gives her a free ult every time a teammate ults is super fun. Many times when I would play with friends, they would ult and immediately yell, "Go Minty, go!" And I pressed that ult button and sent myself flying in the air, staggering the boss. These moments induce such dopamine releases that get me hooked on the high of playing the Undertaker even more. I have also found her to be incredibly versatile in a team composition. She can be the tank, a support DPS, or just a straight up DPS monster with the glass necklace relic you get from her remembrance, or a caster with the right spells. I have played her across all Nightlords in Deep of Night, and she is equally viable in all of them from my experience. The Scholar is a status consumables guy. He buffs teammates and debuffs bosses, all while trivializing gank fights with his ultimate art. Before him, people had always joked about throwing pots build as a meme build, but now with the right relics, Scholar can do more damage with a singular fire pot than Wilder's ultimate art. Gank fights like Banished Knights and Beastman Everjail used to be a major headache, especially in Deep of Night. But with Scholar around now, I almost find myself pleasantly surprised when I come across a gank fight. In Deep of Night especially, Scholar's ability to debuff bosses can mean the difference between getting one shot or not, and team heals really help the team survive during those incredibly long marathon fights. Admittedly, Scholar took me a bit of a learning curve. His dodge window is shockingly small, and for a semi-melee character with no shield, this puts him at a disadvantage to even Guardian's dodge. But with a little bit of getting used to, it really is not as bad as I thought. The parry mechanic is a little bit difficult to nail down at the start, and I'm still not very great at it. But if done at the right time, can stagger and interrupt most enemy moves. It is an interesting feature that adds even more nuance to this character. I tend to play him more defensively, focusing on team support relics that provide buffs and heals to my team, weaving in and out of combat to apply status, debuffs, and staying alive to revive teammates. I've seen some of my friends taking Scholar onto the offensive, and with the right relics, he can also provide crazy damage. Overall, I'd say Scholar is a very strong character who requires some learning to really make him shine. I love to play him and improve my skills at playing him, and I'm always happy to see one on my team. My second favorite thing about this DLC has got to be the new Nightlords. The Balancers and the Dreadlord are two very interesting additions. They provide new elements for players to look for, sleep, and rot, which were not as relevant in the base game. In terms of boss fight gameplay-wise, Dreadlord might have just become my favorite Nightlord, right up there along with Heelster and Fulgor. His moves are reminiscent of Slave Knight Gale, chaotic yet elegant. With the background music playing, this boss fight feels like a dance. The first time I fought him, I found myself in shock every time he transitioned. There was more and more spectacle, more and more technical intricacies. And by the time we had defeated him, it truly felt like a rewarding finale to a long and arduous journey. The Balancers is an interesting concept, a pure gank fight that is somehow not very frustrating the way it usually is. I find myself intrigued by the cinema, entertained by the pace of combat, and the Everdark version, well, it brings a new level of chaos more than the Everdark Libra. I don't have much to say about this one, as I feel the normal version of the Balancers can fall flat for me after a few runs. And especially compared to the other Nightlords in Deep of Night, the Balancers is certainly not my favorite. But it gets the job done. This fight is where Scholar truly shines, and it feels like FromSoft almost tailored an entire boss to Scholar's kit just to show him off. Overall, the night bosses for the Nightlords are entertaining enough. While I'm not too crazy about any of them in particular, I am happy to see Artorias included as well as the Demon Princes. They're a nice nod to the OG Dark Souls and bring with them a continuity and cohesion from the rest of the Souls repertoire. The next thing I want to cover is the thing that tripped me up the most at the start, the new Shifting Earth, the Great Hollow. Actually, scratch that, it's more like a new map altogether. Immediately after the release of this DLC, I felt a sense of unease because this map is unlike Limveld or any of the other Shifting Earth events. It is incredibly vertical to a point where I felt like I needed to actively forget how to navigate Limveld to override with this new map's navigation method. The gimmick of this Shifting Earth is to go around and break crystals around the map. Initially, this was an interesting feature, as it adds another variable to routing decisions. But after the nth time playing this map, looking for crystals can start to feel like a little bit of a chore. I do very much appreciate the Divine Towers, as they provide that boss rush experience I love about the Rotted Woods. One thing I have to constantly remind myself of while traversing through the map is where the exit to a certain structure and how long it takes me to get out of it. With the way this map is set up, it is incredibly easy to get trapped underground or inside a structure while the night is closing in, and before you know it, you're running out of flasks and dying in the rain. Even after weeks of learning, I'm still not sure how I feel about this map. While the aesthetics are beautiful, the verticality makes routing a bit more complex, and team comms a bit more intricate, especially with randoms. My overall experience feels underwhelming. Not to say that this Shifting Earth needs to be way better than the other base game ones, as it is only one of the 5 possible Shifting Earths you can get, but I have to say that the Rotted Woods is still my personal favorite of them all. On the other hand though, I love the new points of interest on the existing Limveld map. The new additions of blacksmith villages and underground ruin structures are fresh new elements that add variety to the base map. This was exactly the kind of additions I was looking forward to, as they provide new enemy types and layouts to explore and optimize. Overall, the new map is not my favorite thing about the DLC, but it is starting to grow on me a little bit. And it does provide a new factor to the Deep of Night randomization, so no complaints there. Now on to the last part I want to cover in this DLC, the new raids, Tricephalos, Caligo, and the Balancers event. This was definitely an element to the DLC I have not anticipated. The base game had 4 raids, Morgoth, Pest, Augur, and the Libra invasions, each with their own perk that I have come to love as they can help with the expeditions in their own way. And they were all fairly easy to accomplish. With these new invasions though, not quite as simple. The Caligo event is hands down the easiest to do. Other than the fact that you likely won't be able to see anything, and your PC might get a little fried from everything going on the screen, all you need is one person from your team to go track her down, hit her once or twice, and you get a very useful buff that turns you invisible at low health. This has saved me many times, and in those moments, I'm always grateful for the event. The Balancers event is one that gives me so many mixed feelings. The buff sounds incredible in theory, giving you free revives that can come in handy, especially at 3 bars in a boss fight. But in practice, this is a raid not quite as straightforward. When in a trio expedition, you each get teleported to a different point of interest, often scattered across the map, where you need to find a single balancer amongst a camp of enemies that are fighting one another. The balancer is often standing at where the camp boss is, farthest from the entrance if there are multiple. She herself is very squishy, often goes down in 5 hits or so at level 4 to 5. But the problem for me is that usually to get to the balancer herself, you have to go through the entire camp. Even though the enemies are infighting, the boss is usually not fighting the balancer. I often find myself aggroing the entire camp, especially at these ruined structures that have very narrow pathways leading to the boss, inevitably dragging quite a number of enemies into the boss room. I have tried killing every mob on my way down, then killing the balancer, which can be quite a time sink and very easily get ganked on. And I have also tried my hardest aggroing as few enemies as I could and try to weave myself among them as to not have to fight the entire camp, only to get snuck up on while I'm trying to take on the balancer. Every once in a while this raid goes well for me, especially if I'm playing a character that has a decent AoE, like Walder or Iron Eye. But if I get caught playing Recluse or Duchess with no ult ready, well, things tend to get very dicey for me. As for the buff, well, like I said, it sounds good in theory. Maybe I just have terrible luck, but the Balancer buff never happens to me when I'm down in an actual boss fight or a Nightlord fight, but will revive me over and over and over again when I'm intentionally dying to the rain trying to get my flasks back. So maybe to someone who has better luck than me, the buff is great, but I am still waiting for that to happen to me. My least favorite invasion has to be Tricephalos. It has always happened either at level 3 or when I'm about to go into the castle. They're always spread very far apart, so to save time, my team and I will often split up and take on them 1v1 and try to group up afterwards. The passive health drain can be a nuisance when you're fighting Tricephalos, all while the little minion dogs are spewing fire across the ground. We have also tried to ignore the invasion altogether, which was possible, but then again, annoying to deal with given the red screen effect and the passive health drain. The buff grants you refunded stamina for successive attacks, which is great for melee characters, but to be completely honest, I've only really noticed it once or twice in combat. Overall, I could really live without this invasion, but with enough practice, it does become easier to change routing and improvise. At the end here, I want to talk about some quality of life updates and patches that are released around the same time as the DLC, even though they're technically not a part of the expansion pack itself. I have no critiques on this, but lots of positive things to say about how they greatly improved my overall gaming experience. The biggest thing to note is the buffs they added to melee characters. I think after the release of Deep of Night, there were a lot of sentiments about casters' ability to greatly out-DPS melee characters. It almost became the meta to play casters. and things tend to get a bit repetitive once there is a quote-unquote meta way to play. And I find myself falling into this pattern as well and getting bored from doing the same thing over and over again. Now, with new weapon passives, relics, and this new map, all provide an opportunity to shine as melee characters as well. As for casters, especially Revenant, I am so happy that FromSoft has finally added relics that can switch up her starting spells. Given that you can guarantee offensive spells on her starting seal now, relics that boost certain affinity and spell schools are also way more viable and effective. Honestly, a much needed buff. Overall, I am very content and pleasantly surprised by the quality of the DLC. Maybe it's wishful thinking, but I really hope that FromSoft would consider supporting this game down the road. I believe that this game has the potential for infinite gameplay loops. If you have not yet tried the DLC, this is your sign to take the leap. If you love playing Nightreign and its DLC, I welcome you to join our Discord to meet like-minded people. Thank you for being here, and until next time, bye.